But let's talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. Let's break down this article from Paul Dehner Jr., covers the Bengals for The Athletic, friend of the show. We've had him on, host of the Growler podcast as well. And the things that he said in this article didn't necessarily surprise me, and I don't think it should have surprised many of you either. But at the same time, when somebody who's as reliable and as close to the team as Paul Dehner is, when he goes out there and pens a piece like this, it should turn a lot of heads, and that's exactly what it's doing right now. He's got great insider information on how the team operates. He's covered them for a long time, and he understands how this team probably is going to proceed over the course of the next few weeks and certainly into the offseason as well. Now, if you clicked on this particular video, I was suggesting in the title that maybe major changes would be made for the Cincinnati Bengals. And I think a lot of people in the fan base, a lot of people that cover the NFL nationally would sit here and bang the table and say, absolutely, major changes should be made. Absolutely, the guy that's drafting these players and continues to whiff year after year after year in the first round, in the second round, in the third round, he should be held accountable. He should be released of his duties. The head coach that has Joe Burrow, has Jamar Chase, has T. Higgins, has had Trey Hendrickson, has missed the playoffs now for 3 consecutive years. Maybe there should be a change as far as who is running the operation as the head coach of this football team. For the defensive coordinator, who's in year 1 with the team here in this stint with the Cincinnati Bengals, that was leading for what was a historically bad defense for much of the year, a defense that was compared to some of the worst defenses in the history of the National Football League. Well, guess what? None of those guys are probably going to be relieved of their duties, all of which will probably be back for 2026 and maybe even beyond that. Here's a couple of noteworthy quotes that Paul outlined in his piece that I wanted to bring to your guys' attention and kind of break down. First, I want to tee this up by basically explaining, which we talked about on yesterday's show, all of the horrible things that have happened with this organization over the course of the past 24 to 48 hours. At the top of the list, they were eliminated from playoff contention, right, for the 3rd consecutive year. I've made the point several times on the show, as long as Joe Burrow is your quarterback, you should never miss the playoffs. I understand Joe Burrow didn't play much of this year. I understand a couple of years ago he didn't play much of the year either. I understand that has a direct impact on your team making or missing the playoffs. But the bottom line is the AFC North has been absolutely horrible this year. And you've had plenty of opportunities to win games with Joe Burrow, the Buffalo game, and without Joe Burrow, the Bear game, the Jet game, right, with Joe Flacco at the helm, and you were unable to do it. If you just get one victory, shoot, 2, you're in a great spot, but just one victory against one of those teams, you are still alive. Maybe not alive and well, but alive in the playoff race, and you were just too incompetent to be able to go out there and stay alive in the playoff race, and you find yourself eliminated here on December 16th with 10 losses on your resume this year. That's thing number one. You've got your quarterback at the podium. Seems pretty depressed during his weekly press conference meeting with the media, right? He goes out there and says, I got to figure out if I can have fun playing this game still. That wasn't the direct quote, but it's something along those lines. And it's got people nationally running laps going, oh, my goodness, does Joe Burrow want out of Cincinnati? Now, thankfully, after the game, he kind of put a stop to those comments, but not good, bottom line, that transpired within your organization here this past week. And then after the game, he goes, yeah, we're a losing football team. We do losing things out on the football field. Not great to have your guy out there saying it, although he, of course, is right. What else happened? Well, the Ravens beat you 24-0 at home, right? You were at home, freezing temperatures. You have your fans come out, right? And you can't even score a singular point in the game. You lose 24-0. Oh, how about on top of that, we talk about, they can't wipe off the seats, right? For the fans that showed up to the stadium and it was so cold. They couldn't remove the snow from the seats. Right? Oh, they had to shut down some of the gates because not enough people were working, and that caused a bottleneck, which caused many fans to get into the game after the game started. Not a great look for your organization there either. You got Jamar Chase, who gets caught on camera cursing at the fans, basically saying, well, if you're going to heckle Joe Burrow, you can get the heck out of here. Respect Jamar for those comments. If you're at the Cincinnati Bengals game and you're going to heckle Joe Burrow, yeah, it's within your right as a fan to do it. You paid hard-earned money to get in the stadium. I understand that. But there's a lot better people you should be heckling than Joe Burrow. I understand the offense scored 0 points, but come on. Let's understand that. And you couple it with Zach Moss, who, of course, was your starting running back week 1 last year. He goes out there, puts out a post, and says, you know what? This is the worst team and the worst organization in all of sports. So a pretty bad look for this organization over the course of the past few days and certainly over the course of the past week as well. And a lot of these, right, if just a handful of these things that happen at other organizations, fireable offenses. Nobody has gotten fired here for the Cincinnati Bengals as we sit here on Tuesday, December 16th. But let's kind of dive into this piece a little bit from Paul. I thought there were some interesting comments. I've said that I don't think the Bengals are going to move off of Duke Tobin, right? Paul has come on this show. Other people that cover the team, Jay Morrison, Richard Skinner, have come on this show, and they're like, yeah, Duke Tobin, we've been here for several years. We've watched this thing. Him and the ownership group, they're like this, right? Him and the Brown family, they're like this. Him and the Blackburn family, they're like this. There's even been a quote about, oh, you know what? He's basically an extension of the family, an extension of the ownership group, and Paul certainly alluded to that in his piece. As it relates to Duke Tobin, Paul Dehner said this. Internally, it's just not happening. Tobin is viewed as family in nearly the same regard as the actual Browns and Blackburns. There is zero thought that his job is in jeopardy. He will have to lead the Bengals out of this drought, and ownership trusts him to do so. That's as cut and dry as it gets from Paul Dehner Jr. That's not, well, maybe they'll move off him. There's a chance they could go in a different direction. That is 100%. It ain't happening. Duke Tobin's a big reason they're into this mess, but the ownership group trusts him to get out of this mess. Shouldn't surprise you. A lot of us, myself included, I've called for that man's job. And I don't take that lightly. To come on here and call for somebody's job, I don't think necessarily it's my place to do it. But I've done it with Duke Tobin because I just think things have been that bad. And Paul Dehner Jr. is saying, yep, nope, ain't happening. Duke Tobin will be back with this team next year, and he will be overseeing the draft in April in 2026. And ultimately, we'll see if he can help dig himself and dig this organization out of the mess in which he certainly has a significant hand in creating. A couple more quotes from Paul Dehner Jr. Let's transition here to Zack Taylor. Right, I think there's kind of a split between people locally that follow the team, fans of the team, right? There's some people that say, Duke, let's blame Duke. Some people would say Zach, let's blame Zach. There's some people that say both, blame both, get them both out of here. As it relates to Zack Taylor, here's what Paul said. There are a few key points surrounding Taylor's status. For one, his contract will be a factor. Contrary to prior reports, Taylor actually has 2 years remaining on his contract after this season, not one. The Bengals don't like to pay head coaches money for them not to coach. People call them cheap, right? That is certainly a cheap tendency, right? A lot of ownership groups in the NFL, a lot of owners in the NFL, they're so rich, they have billions of dollars. It is just a rounding error for them to say, you know what, it's not working here. You're gone. We'll pay you not to coach. Bring someone else in. For these billionaires, it really means nothing, which is really hard for people like me and you to comprehend because we're talking about millions and millions of dollars. A lot of these billionaires in the NFL, they're like, whatever, see ya. We'll pay another guy and still pay you not to coach. Brown family, they're billionaires, right? But they don't operate like they're billionaires. And, all these NFL owners now are billionaires, but when you look at kind of how rich some of these are, the Bengals and Browns are certainly at the lower end of the spectrum as far as how much money they do have. But we saw it with Marvin Lewis, right? Going into the final year of his contract, everybody was sitting down. The Bengals were a complete mess. And it's like, dude, any other organization would fire you here at this point. Mike Brown, he sat down with Marvin Lewis and said, you know what, you're going to be a lame duck this year. You're going to go in without a contract beyond this year. You're going to coach. That's what happened. It didn't go well, and they moved off him, right? And, we're not the Pittsburgh Steelers here in Cincinnati, but they don't love firing coaches. They're a very patient group. And this is a guy in Zac Taylor that, of course, has taken this team to a Super Bowl, which feels like that was a lifetime ago. But they've got no interest in paying money to a guy not to coach. And it's a great point by Paul. A lot of people think, oh, you know what, maybe this would be his time to, get an extension, right? Well, there's 2 more years. There's 2 more years. So the Bengals by no means have to give him an extension. I think the city would explode if they gave him an extension at this point after this year. But there's no pressure. It's not like he's going into the final year of his contract. There are 2 years left here, 2 more full seasons for Zac Taylor. And I think to me, again, other organizations, it's a rounding error. They move on, right? It's not how things operate here in Cincinnati. Would be shocked ultimately if they moved off of Zac Taylor. He signed a 5-year extension following the Super Bowl season. Then after reaching the AFC Championship game in 22, he signed another 5-year extension through the 2027 campaign. I think that gets swept under the rug a little bit because, it looked like, oh my goodness, the Bengals they have a chance to be a dynasty. They have a chance to rattle off multiple Super Bowls. They went to one, lost, got to the conference title game the following year, had multiple opportunities to win that. So the Blackburns, they're like, oh my goodness, we got something great here. And Zac Taylor gave him another extension that next year, which I think a lot of people forget. Totally different if next year is the final year of his contract. There's 2 more for Zac Taylor. And lastly, they've been a top 10 offense over the course of the last 4 seasons. It's true, even with Burrow missing some time. With Burrow among the best quarterbacks in the NFL, blowing up that side of the ball with all the problems that need to be fixed on defense would create an entirely new set of unnecessary issues. People don't like to hear it, but it's the reality of the situation. I understand the team scored 0 points last week, right? I completely understand that. But when you go big picture here, you take a step back, you go, shoot, Bengals with Jake Browning in 2023, they won some games. Bengals with Joe Flacco here this year, only won 1 game. They look pretty solid on offense. They were one of the best offenses, actually, in the National Football League. And I alluded to this yesterday, and this is how the Brown family and the Blackburn family are going to look at this. They're going to go, we got all kinds of issues on defense. Who knows if we can get this thing fixed on that side of the football? Well, what if we move off of our head coach? What if the offense takes a turn in the wrong direction? Now we have this horrible, incompetent defense paired with an offense that isn't that great. Then you got a whole world more of trouble on your hands at that point if you're the Cincinnati Bengals. And clearly, that is not in a position you would want to be in. As I mentioned on yesterday's show, there's a portion of the fan base that sits here and goes, fire everybody. It can't get any worse. I got news for you. It can get a heck of a lot worse than it is right now. Take a look at Las Vegas. Take a look at New York with the Jets. Take a look down at Tennessee with the Tennessee Titans. Things are bad here in Cincinnati. And it feels even worse because of how far you fell from the expectations and the aspirations you had going into this year. But don't be fooled here. They can get a heck of a lot worse. And the final domino here is Al Golden. What the heck do you do with Al Golden? As I mentioned at the start of this segment, going into the year, beginning of the year, you were in a spot with Al Golden where he was conducting one of the worst defenses in the history of the National Football League. Right? And I'm not here to say this Bengals defense is a top 10 defense now. I'm not here to say that this Bengals defense is good. I'm not here to say this Bengals defense is serviceable. But the Bengals defense clearly has taken some steps in the right direction over the second half of the season, right? And you already played that card last year, firing your coordinator, right? And it'd be one thing if you fire Lou Anarumo and he was doing horrible in Indianapolis. That's not what's happening right now. He's keeping the Colts alive here in this thing as they got a 44-year-old playing quarterback for them and Phillip Rivers. Defense is hanging on, doing the best they can. Lou Anarumo's done a really nice job in Indianapolis this year. The last thing you want to do is fire another coordinator and bring in a new guy, and that be the issue, right? It'd be one thing if you didn't see any improvement from week 1 to now, you've seen some improvement, right? So Al Golden, probably not going to be a guy that you move off of. And if you're Zac Taylor, the last thing you want to do is just continuing to fire coordinators, because lots of people are going to say, actually, it's not the coordinators that are the issue. It's you. That's the issue. And a lot of people, of course, are saying that here right now. But you look at this Bengals team with 10 wins here on December 16th, or 10 losses here on December 16th, in a spot in a year where they came in, right, with Super Bowl expectations, and they have fallen this short. You would think major changes would be happening for this team. But as Paul Dehner points out, doesn't look like any are. Head coach, a couple years left on his deal. Bengals aren't in the business of paying a guy not to coach. Probably coming back. Hasn't lost the locker room. Probably coming back. Duke Tobin, a guy that continues to miss time after time after time again in all 7 rounds of the NFL draft, who continues to go through off seasons and neglect very important areas when it comes to roster construction. Well, he's tight. The Blackburns love him. The Browns love him. He's kind of in the ownership group, right? He'll be sticking around too. And people haven't said this, but if Duke Tobin sticks around after this year, I think it's safe to say, oh, yep, he's got a lifetime contract. If they keep Duke Tobin around going into next year and they let him oversee the 2026 NFL draft, we might as well stop talking about firing him because he has a lifetime contract at that point with the Cincinnati Bengals, which that's a pretty good gig, right? You can oversee operations. I understand there's a lot of pressure that comes with it, but if you can oversee operations in the National Football League, not have the pressure to be tagged a general manager, just a de facto general manager, and as badly as you do, you can keep coming back. You can keep making draft picks. You can keep making trades. Bengals, of course, don't do that, but you can keep operating here in the offseason and free agency. You don't have to do well. Keep coming back. We won't give you that general manager title, but you'll be the de facto general manager. You'll call all the shots. You don't have to succeed, but you can keep your job. Not a bad gig to be signed up for. And then the final domino, of course, Al Golden. Well, I mean, you're going to fire a guy. Again, you just fired a guy at the defensive coordinator spot. And the defense has gotten better. Last thing, if you're Zac Taylor, who knows, right? I mean, Zac Taylor understands, right? Any other place in the National Football League, he's gone, right, by now. And he's got an opportunity here in Cincinnati. Not a great look for Zac Taylor if he fires Al Golden. And it's Zac Taylor's decision to make. So now all of a sudden you sit there, you look at the record, you go 10 wins, a fall from grace, expectations and aspirations that were through the roof. Right? Let's remember that, right? This team, you may not believe that they were going to compete for a Super Bowl. That was the design. They gave Trey, they didn't give him a long-term deal. They gave him that bump in salary, paid him a ton of money this year. The whole point was, this is our year. We're going in. All the chips on the table to win a Super Bowl. And you sit here on December 16th, and you already have 10 losses. So all the people out there hoping that major change was going to be made, doesn't look like any major changes are going to be made for the Cincinnati Bengals. And that's very tough to swallow. It's very, very tough to swallow when you have a team that falls so short of your expectations, and it looks like they're just going to, you know what, let's run this thing back. Let's continue to build on what we have. This wasn't supposed to be a rebuilding year, despite how bad you were on defense last year. This was supposed to be a year where you could compete for a world championship, and you can't even sniff the AFC North in what's been one of the worst years, probably the worst year in the history of the division. Now we can kind of transition this conversation a little bit. We'll do a full segment on Zac Taylor replacements. Lots of people are doing them out there right now on guys that you could come in to be the head coach. Not going to do a full list here on the show, but I do want to throw around a couple of names to monitor as well if Cincinnati ultimately were to make a move. Now, all the things I just said, all the things that Dehner pointed out, right, talked about the week that the Bengals had, the weekend that the Bengals had. It's a fireable offense across the National Football League at a lot of other spots. Not a fireable offense here in Cincinnati. But they can't afford to do this again, right? You saw the Miami Dolphins last night. That didn't look good. You can't afford to go down there and get blown out. Right? You can't afford to have the Cardinals come in here, who are a horrible football team, and beat you. The Browns, we'll see. But, Paul pens this piece, and I agree with everything he says, just that it's going to happen, not that it's the right thing, right? Not that I believe that all those guys should be back, because I don't. I just anticipate that that's how Cincinnati is going to move forward here this offseason. We could be having a different conversation in a couple weeks, right? Now, if they win a game or win 2 games, probably no changes. But if the team quits, if they get blown out by one of these crappy teams, right, maybe things change. But as we sit here with 3 games left, that is how I anticipate things unfolding. But that's as bad of a week as an organization can have, right? You get shut out. Your franchise quarterback is turning heads at his press conference throughout the week, right? You got fans heckling your franchise quarterback. Jamar's caught on camera, calling him out. You had a former player who isn't just some random guy. He was your starting running back at the beginning of last year saying, one of the worst or the worst organization in sports, right? You got the national media piling on because he didn't brush off the seats and some of the gates were closed. It doesn't get much worse than that for an organization. That's about as bad of a week as you can have. And the Bengals, with the bar that they've set, which isn't very high, they might be able to navigate around this bad week and move on. But if this snowballs, right, and all of a sudden you go down to Miami, similar things happen, come home here against Arizona, you lose that game, things could get out of hand. Dak, by the way, also mentioned yesterday, the plan is that Joe is going to play the remaining 3 games. Don't be surprised if they pivot off that going into the Cleveland game. That's what I've said here. I think you should play the next 2, and I think you sit down all your guys, Jamar, T, Joe, the final week against Cleveland. Zach said the plan is to play all 3, but don't be surprised if he changes his mind a little bit there, especially if they pick up a win or 2 here over the course of the next couple of weeks. But some names I do want to throw out. Bengals pay their head coach, what's Zach making, between $4 and $5 million. So the people out there, and look, Tomlin, if they win the division, is not going to get fired. Harbaugh, we'll see, maybe. And the people that want to throw out their names, they're going to get massive contracts, offers from other teams, right? The Giant job, for example. The Giants will pay either Harbaugh or Tomlin, if one of those guys was available, close to $15 million. Like, they will go all in for a guy like that. The Bengals are, they're going to offer 4 or 5. If they up it, they'll offer 7. I would be surprised if that happens. There's other teams across the league that aren't paying their coach a ton, but the Bengals certainly are at the bottom of the barrel. For all you people out there saying fire the head coach and bring Harbaugh in or bring Mike Tomlin in or bring one of these hotshot names in, it ain't going to happen, right? I understand, it'd be fun to come here and work with Joe Burrow. Well, how about go into New York where there's a little bit more stability? I understand they got brash ownership over there and pay you a heck of a lot more money, right, and be in a more stable organization, which is crazy to say that the Giants would be more stable than Cincinnati, but Giants aren't the Jets, right? The Giants are a heck of a lot more stable than what you've got here in Cincinnati. And there's these people out there that think, maybe there's a Joe Burrow discount. We talked about it with Kyle Schwarber, right? A hometown discount. Money talks. There's no Joe Burrow discount. These coaches think that they can win wherever they go, right? And a guy like me would sit there and say, I'd work with Joe Burrow. I'd go to Cincinnati over New York. These top-of-the-line head coaches, they're going to the Giants job with a quarterback on a rookie deal before they're taking the Cincinnati job. They're making way more money there, and they're not thinking twice about it, just so we're all on the same page. One name that gets thrown around, a lot of people roll their eyes at it. I don't think you should roll your eyes at it. If the Bengals hired Mike McCarthy as the next head coach, that's not something where – you plan the Super Bowl parade, you get all excited, you pop champagne, you say, we got our guy, right? That's not the quote-unquote sexy hire, getting a guy like Mike McCarthy. But he brings everything you need, right? All Mike McCarthy does is win, right? He got fired in Dallas for winning 12 games a year, right? Had a ton of success in Green Bay, has a world championship, has the experience of playing and coaching a star quarterback. Defenses have never been awful, right? He's an offensive guy. He calls the plays, but his defenses haven't been awful. And that's what you need for Cincinnati. You need a guy to come in, be a grown-up in the room, have some stability, understand how to keep this offense high-functioning, keep this offense functioning at a high level, stabilize the defense. I think Mike McCarthy, where it's not that big-time hire that lots of people are all excited about, brings a lot of stability here, and I think you could win right away with Mike McCarthy. Not saying he's at the top of the list, but he's a guy where it's like, I think about, bringing in Mike McCarthy here at this spot. Hafley's another name, defensive coordinator of the Green Bay Packers, right? Has head coaching experience at the collegiate level, was Boston College's head coach for several years, didn't have much success there, but I question, how much success Nick Saban would have had at Boston College. Very difficult place to win, right? Was at Ohio State for a year, I believe, co-defensive coordinator there, so some Ohio ties. Maybe this isn't the year where he gets thrown around in head coaching circles as far as head coaching candidates, but I think Hafley can be a good coach in the NFL. And again, that fits your budget, right? You could get away with paying Hafley $4.5 million, right, here at this point. Another name would be Robert Saleh, right? The job that Robert Saleh has done in San Francisco is unbelievable. There's guys like Mike Vrabel and Ben Johnson that are getting a lot of Coach of the Year love. Personally, my vote would go to Kyle Shanahan at this point, and Robert Saleh has done an incredible job at this point, helping their defense. They got a lot of youth there. They're all hurt. All their stars, all their future Hall of Famers aren't playing on that side of the ball. You got a bunch of young guys out there flying around, and Saleh's done a tremendous job. Things obviously were horrible in New York. When have things not been horrible in New York when I'm talking about the New York Jets? He's one of those guys that, he's a retread. I would say Robert Saleh deserves another chance. And that's kind of a shift in culture, right? More of an alpha in the building, right? That's not really the personality that Zach brings to the table. Defensive guy. I would give Saleh another chance if I'm another organization. I don't think he should be judged based off his tenure with the New York Jets. Deserves one more shot, and he would be a name that I would monitor there as well. So to me, those are the three that immediately come to mind. McCarthy, Hafley, and Saleh. Right, if you were looking in a different direction. Again, we'll go through a full list at some point where we'll really break down all the potential names that could also come in here and potentially be a coach for the Cincinnati Bengals. People say John Gruden. I understand it does engagement on social media, gets clicks. We love that. We understand that. Bengals aren't hiring John Gruden, and there's not a team in the NFL that's hiring John Gruden, in my opinion. I'd be shocked if they did. He's been removed from the game for so long. He's got the internet, Twitter presence. He's awesome. I love John Gruden. He's incredibly entertaining, and he knows ball, and he's won before. That was a long time ago, right? You're seeing this league, like Bill Belichick, wins all these Super Bowls. People say he's the GOAT. I don't think he's the greatest coach of all time, but people say he is, and he leaves after a couple bad years in New England and doesn't get hired. Right? Doesn't get hired. This league is going younger. It's getting more innovative. They're shifting in a different direction. Right? So I don't think Gruden's a serious name. Belichick, obviously, not a serious name either. People say Joe Brady. he's had his moments in Buffalo. Clearly, Josh Allen and him have a great rapport. He's not one of those guys that's like, oh, he's a great up-and-coming offensive coordinator that's awesome. At some point, a team's going to roll the dice on him and offer him to be their head coach, and we'll see how he does. But the people in this town just like saying it because the LSU connection, Reed said this on Off the Bench. I completely agree. That was a long time ago, right? It worked in college a long time ago. Let's not live in fairyland, right? Let's not live in fantasy land. Oh, we're going to bring Joe Brady back here, and it's going to rekindle some of that 2019 magic. Come on. Now, if he was running a really well-oiled machine in Buffalo and the offense was high-functioning and not just relying on Josh Allen being spectacular, sure, bring him in, give him an opportunity. But I don't really see that being the case here. Brian Flores, I got no interest there. No interest, right? Kind of the Brian Kelly thing. I don't want a bad guy being the head coach. Part of why Zack Taylor has been here this whole time. Real good guy, Zack Taylor. I got no interest in a bad guy being the head coach. I'm out on Flores completely. Couple other names, some other retread options. You got Burke, the coordinator in Houston, who he's gotten some buzz lately, but, I'd pump the brakes there a little bit there on that. I think a lot of coordinators would look good with Derek Stingley and Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter and Bullock, their safety. I mean, they got dudes all over that defense. D'Amico does a nice job, so I'm a little hesitant there on a guy like Burke, but I think for me right now, and again, we'll do our full list going forward, but McCarthy, Hafley, Saleh would be kind of the three at the top of the list for me. But at the end of the day, that might just be all nonsense because it certainly looks like Zack Taylor is going to be back. I, of course, have backed Zack Taylor a lot. I haven't made my official proclamation on whether or not I think he should stick around. We will do that at the end of the season on that kind of Black Monday as coaches are getting fired left and right. But I think the next few weeks, as I said on yesterday's show, are very, very big for Zack Taylor, and we will see ultimately how he handles it and how this team plays and if they can pick up any wins here before this thing's all said and done. But disaster of a season for the Bengals, and great piece from Paul Dehner Jr. Encourage everybody to check it out on The Athletic, but doesn't seem like major changes are going to be made here with this organization.